Greetings and welcome to a Simmer and Gabby podcast. Rob Simpson along with Bruce Boudreau. Pleasure to be here for VancouverHockeyInsider.com, SeattleHockeyInsider.com. Bruce, how the heck are you in 2024?
Hey, it's a new year. I still feel young, so it's all good.
Very nice. You just came from a Hershey Cubs junior game. How did it go?
Yeah, well, our Cubs are doing okay this year, and they won 4-3 this afternoon, and so swept a weekend series against a team from Buffalo. So they're solidly in third place, and that's it's a good season for them.
Very nice. I have to bring up, unfortunately, the Spengler Cup. Now, I wasn't watching it. You were coaching Team Canada in Davos, Switzerland over the holidays. I was following it, couldn't watch it, but you were up 3-1 in the third period. I'm like, oh, they got this. Gabby's going to the final. Suddenly I click back, bang, 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 4-3 loss. What the hell happened?
I'm glad you brought it up like that. Actually, we were actually playing a very good third period. Get it out, get it out. Then we took a penalty for we had seven left-handed defensemen,
Ooh.
and it was on the right side, and the defenseman grabbed it and he shot it over the glass for one of those penalties. And then they made it 3-2 on the power play,
Yeah.
and you're thinking, okay, there's under 5 minutes, and they got a what I thought was a pretty fluky goal with about a minute and a half to go in the game to tie it. And I'm saying, okay, let's just take this to overtime. We will win it in overtime. We will regroup and everything. So I had my best defensive players out there, and it was just it was a clear in from the point basically where the guy's just throwing it at the net, and it hit one of their guys' sticks in midair and went between his legs with 38 seconds to go, and you went, "Oh my goodness, what's just happened here?" So it was pretty frustrating, but a great experience, and nonetheless. It would have been nice to win that game. I don't know if our chances would have been good the next day because this was started at 8:15 local time, ended around 11 o'clock,
Ooh.
and the game was the next day at noon, and it would have been our fourth game in 4 nights.
Right.
So I mean, it was bad enough that game, by the way, just to make my little excuses here, we got three guys injured during that game, and two of them were two of our best three defensive players. So in the last 5 minutes and penalty killers, it became a little uh, probably double shifting a little bit of too many people. Because the one thing about the Spangler Cup, when you go over there, I don't know any of the players.
Right.
So we have one practice, and then you're learning by osmosis, getting there. But the experience itself, fabulous. The fan reaction of 7,000 people just standing up and singing and screaming the whole game. Great. The little town of Davos was super. And I mean, right in the middle of I mean, we look out our hotel window, and I mean, the ski slopes are right there. They're landing at the foot of the hotel.
Right.
So it was a really great experience, and to be able to put on the Canada jersey, or to be part of Team Canada, was really special. Of all the things I've done, it'll go down as one of the more special things.
Very cool. And just for fans that are unfamiliar, and many aren't, even hardcore NHL fans aren't. Spengler Cup is basically a senior, an elite level senior men's tournament, considered amateur. Although during, I believe, one of the lockouts, we had the likes of Patrice Bergeron and others over there winning a Spengler Cup for Canada. But
Yeah,
but one of the elite men's senior tournaments during the holiday. It goes back decades. It's in beautiful Davos,
100 years it goes back. I
Yep.
mean, that's amazing how long this tournament has gone on. I think Canada has been involved since about 1985. But the tournament itself it's on all TV in Europe. It's a huge club tournament. If the World Juniors weren't going on at the same time, it would be the one everybody's talking about. So it's a pretty cool deal.
Well, you did very well, and you had the fluky finish, and it was at I don't know how to pronounce it. Always never get that one right. Partibus, who you
Part of
lost?
boot, part of buche. I
Partibuche.
just called partridge tree. Uh, because I couldn't pronounce it either.
That's the hockey club that you lost to. You did better than the other former Vancouver coach, Travis Green. Greener didn't win a game last year over the Spengler, so he's an
Well,
assistant with the New
that
Jersey
was a
Devils.
goal of mine. I did not want to go down there and not win a game. And
You won
uh,
two, right?
we won two. We won the first game 4-0. We lost the second game. This is the craziest thing that happened. In the second game, we lost 4-3 too. And again, we were winning 3-1 in the third period.
Oh,
The goalies, unbeknownst to me, even changed on the fly. One had cramps, he came to the bench. The other guy went on. The play was down at the other end. And I didn't even know we changed goalies till the next morning.
wow.
It was crazy. I mean, I said, "Are you kidding me?" Arundel was in for the last two goals, and they said yes. And I said, "I didn't even know he was in the net."
Wow. Changed on the fly.
Yeah. Well, the
That's
play was down at the other end. The
that's
goalie
crazy.
had cramps. Anyway,
Wow. All right. Um, let's jump in. Well, since we brought up the Canucks and coaching the Canucks, we'll get to our favorite. By the way, our favorite number this week is going to be number one, but we'll wait on that a little bit. Let's get into Vancouver. They're the top team right now in the Pacific Division. They've shown signs they're starting to give up goals here and there in bunches. They held off a beat up New Jersey team 6-4 the other night. And what do we think about what you've seen lately?
well, I this is what I think. Like, I mean, I didn't realize Vancouver, Jersey had so many guys out, but I mean, I thought Vancouver swarmed all over them, and I mean, I was a little worried at the end of the first period. I think they had a 1 goal lead, but they had completely outplayed them, and they should have had. That's when you need to get a 2 or 3 goal lead, to feel comfortable. But I think this trip is. I think they have 4 more games on the road or 3 more. I
It's
think they're
well, it's
playing.
seven total.
Okay,
So
they have
they
the
got five.
Islanders.
They got five more.
They have the Islanders, the Rangers that I know of. And then after that, I really haven't followed the schedule that tight, but I think will show what they're really made of as
Mhm.
far as um the team that I think they are. I mean, they've got, their good players finally got back on track. I think when I say they're good players, I mean they're star players. I mean,
Right.
they've been getting great, I think, great efforts from the guys, the bottom six, and who are scoring goals. And it was Pedersen scored 2 the other night, and Miller got a couple. And I mean, they hadn't done that in a while. But those guys will, if they keep going, Demko is going to be great. Like, I mean, there's no doubt in my mind. And Casey DeSmith has been really good this year.
Yep.
So you get good goaltending, and you get your star players playing the way they can, and Quinn Hughes continuing with his Norris Trophy type season. I think they should be up there the whole way. But I will say this, and I'm not saying this with any negativism, is that I look at Edmonton as crawling really quickly up there. And I think LA and Vegas will get their stuff together, and they will be coming back. And I think it's going to be, and then I look at the Kraken that have gotten points in 9 or 10 straight. I don't know the
10.
number.
10.
Uh, if they continue doing that, there's going to be uh, a 5 team rush, like at the end. Like,
Yeah.
and this is why this road trip for Vancouver is so important. If they can keep their head above water on this road trip, I think they'll be fine. But if all of a sudden they go into a little bit of a slump, like a lot of teams have, you
Vegas.
know, yeah, like Vegas has in LA. I mean, they've lost 4 in a row going into this afternoon's game. I think I think it would really tighten up the the Pacific. I mean, the biggest problem is when you're that far behind, like Edmonton was and like Seattle has, you've got to keep that pace up.
Yeah.
And that pace is really difficult to keep up for the whole season. I mean, yeah, they've got points in 10 straight, but I mean, the first time they lose, they'll realize, oh man, we haven't made that much ground. So they got to keep it up. But if they do, it's going to be a heck of a race come down in March and April.
Yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. By the way, Canucks are, they have the Rangers and Islanders back to back, as you mentioned, then a day off, then they're in Pittsburgh, then a day off, then they're in Buffalo, then a single day off again, and they're at the Columbus Blue Jackets before they return home. Speaking of the Kraken, 8-0-2 in their last 10, 6-game winning streak, longest in franchise history. Here's an interesting thing about that lineup right now. They got some healthy bodies back, and for as much as we kept comparing last season to this season, not having Geeky, Sprong, or Donato around anymore, and not getting the scoring from that bottom six like they were, that has suddenly changed because you have Pierre-Edouard Bellemare, who's more of a face-off guy, doesn't score much, out of the lineup with an injury. Ty Cartier, the kid's moved to the center position. You get Andre Burakovsky healthy. You get Jaden Schwartz healthy. And it's this depth thing is a little frightening for opponents because Dave Haxtell can roll lines. They're on a 6-game road trip. And right now you got Jared McCann and Burakovsky he's back in the lineup on the 4th line. So defending that team kind of starts to look a little bit like last season again, as it relates to him being able to roll the lines.
Well, I mean, if you're rolling out McCann, who scored 40 last year, if I recall,
Mm-hmm.
and Burakovsky, who's been hurt along, but he's got that talent. He scored last night, I think, or the last game, on the 4th line. It is reason and it is cause for concern if you're another team. And if that goaltender continues to
Joey
play like
Daccord.
he has,
Yep.
and I mean, which is out of the blue, quite frankly, and then they're going to be a factor. And I mean, when we're talking about Vancouver again, don't forget Vancouver hasn't played LA yet. I don't think they've played. I think they played Vegas once, and they've played Seattle once, and they still have to play them, multiple times. And even Calgary's playing a lot better. So I mean, it's going to make the Pacific a really tough and probably as interesting a race as there is in the NHL. If anybody back east ever watches those guys late at night, they will see some great hockey.
Yeah, I was going to say they should be watching because it is the most interesting race. It is a very strong division, and there's still some funky stuff going on. You mentioned Edmonton streaking. It's like they just took off and then had a setback again, and now it looks like they're taking out. It's just like
Yeah, I mean, well, and that's what I was saying earlier. It is tough to continue without having a break. You've got to be so mentally focused for every game all the time. And when you have a setback, it's like taking 2 games off instead of one, because there's usually, when you're in that position, there's so many teams ahead of you that when you drop one, it's like dropping 4 points instead of 2.
right. Hey, one quick thought on Joey Daccord, and somebody asked me this in the dressing room after the game the other night in Seattle, and great kid, North Andover, Massachusetts. Love chatting with him. Great attitude, but about 45 games of NHL experience. So you have to be cautious. And the first thing that comes to my head is Spencer Martin in Vancouver, because it was the second coming in the spring. Spencer Martin, our problems are solved. And I remember writing, I'd be a little careful about this, this being your savior come the fall and the winter. If he gets thrust into a situation where your number one goes out, guess what? That's what happened. And oof. Now, let's give Daccord the benefit of the doubt as it stands right now, but let's also remember we're talking about 44, 45 games of NHL experience. So,
Well, there's a big difference, and this is what happened to Spencer. There's a big difference between um,
filling
being
in.
backup
Yeah.
and coming in periodically. And then I think he started his career in Vancouver by getting points in 9 straight.
Right.
And being the man.
Yep.
And when you're the man, then the pressure seems to mount from all sides because you're the guy. And that's why goaltenders with experience are usually the number ones in the NHL. And anybody, you've got that big thrill of getting in there and playing, but you know that when you're done, you usually have a couple games off. He's been the guy, so hopefully, this is where you can make your bones. If he can do it, then he'll have a long career. If not, then we'll see where he ends up.
Yeah. I wish him nothing but the best. And I hope it just keeps
Yep,
rolling for him because
absolutely.
been really he has been fantastic, and it's been really fun to watch. So let's see if that continues. I want to get into a hot topic before we pick our one hot topic, or semi-controversial, if you will, before we get to
Uh-oh.
before we pick our number ones.
Uh-oh.
And
Controversy.
that's Kevin Bieksa. He calls out Nick Cousins on Hockey Night in Canada. Nick Cousins repeated hits from behind, hits in open ice, headshots, on and on and on. He brought up his old teammate Rafi Torres, he mentioned got a 26 game suspension at one point, a 41 game suspension. The way the game is now, enforcers are gone. No one's riding shotgun to protect you. A lot of the hits are followed with fights that are unsubstantiated. Like what? It's like, what the hell's going on? And now you got this guy running around. We've seen a series of hits from behind lately. What do we do? Is it up to the league just to hand out these gigantic suspensions? Is that where we're at?
Boy, it seems to be it's the one penalty in today's game that it seems that the players haven't caught on to it yet. They've caught on to the hooking. They don't hook anymore. They don't hold anymore. I mean, the game is the hitting from behind came in at the same time as
Yep.
all these guys did, but that seems to be the one emotional aspect of the game where guys can't wrap their head around the getting in there and seeing a body and hitting it. And so I find it funny that Kevin talks like that too, because I mean uh Kevin was no angel when he played. I will say this. As much as I love the guy,
Yeah, yeah.
I do. I got to like him an awful lot more when I wasn't coaching him.
Right.
We became good friends, but I mean,
Ducks.
he did some stuff that was sort of borderline a lot of times, but usually in the protection of his teammates, which was a great thing with Kevin. But I mean, the hitting from behind. The other thing that bothers me about that is players know a lot of times that they're getting hit from behind, a lot of times, and they know how to turn their body to try to draw the penalty because you never think you're going to get hurt.
Right.
And then it happens. So it's really it's a tough call, but I mean I don't know how. I wish I was smart enough to know how you could cure that in an emotional game like hockey,
Right.
because things, unless you are right on the ice level, I don't know if you can't get it from TV, but I mean, it is so fast. Things happen so quick, unlike any other sport. I mean, it's so fast. Like I mean, in a quarter second, you can turn your body and you can get hit from behind, and so much damage can be done to the body. So, I'd like to say let's take it out, but I just don't think, as long as you have boards and you have corners of the rink, that it's ever going to be taken out.
Right. I guess we can go back to Pee Wee and put little stop signs on the guy's back.
It doesn't seem to be working though. They know that when the word is, when you see the numbers on the back, you don't
Right.
hit them, right?
Right. Right.
That doesn't seem to be working.
No. All right. Well, I'm sure we'll be hearing more about this down the road. By the way, obviously, since we're picking our favorite number ones, they're going to be goalies. And real quick, as an aside, since I wrote about it today in Simmer's Sunday Nine, Marc-Andre Fleury, crazy play yesterday, in the process of passing, uh, our boy Patrick Waugh for number two all time in wins. You didn't have him in Minnesota. You were gone by then, but you obviously had some major when had Sid the Kid versus the grade eight Washington versus Pitt. You ran into this guy plenty.
Too many times for my liking. When he was younger, like the greatest thing about Marc-Andre that as a coach against him was his quickness, because he's not a big guy. And
Right.
when he was younger, you could never beat him in a shootout. He was just too quick. But I mean, we had a real famous 7 game series against Pittsburgh, and they beat us in game 7, and their goalie was better. He was better than our goalie in game 7, and they went on to win the cup. And um, remember Ted Leonsis telling me he didn't care when I first got there who we beat, how I coached, as long as we beat Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And we did really good during the regular season, but I mean, in the playoffs against them, only the one time did we have success, and that's when they went on to win the cup. But Marc-Andre is a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer. From everything I've heard, an unbelievable teammate and and a great like he's a not only a great goaltender, but I was was on another show the other day, and they said, "What's your biggest peeve?" And I said, "It's the lack of good Canadian goalies."
Oh yeah.
And he's almost the last of a dying breed. Like who's the best Canadian goalie? Is it Carter Hart? Like, I mean, after Marc-Andre Fleury? I mean, it's hard to find really good Canadian goalies. And we develop everybody fabulous in Canada, but I mean, goaltending has been a problem in recent years.
By the way, who is your goalie when you lost that series? Who are you cycling through at that point when you lost to the
I
Penguins?
think, and it's an interesting story. It was Varlamov.
I was going to
Okay.
say Varley. I thought it was maybe
Well,
Varley.
we had Varlamov and Theodore.
Right.
Shea, not Shea Theodore, but the other Theodore, the Montreal goalie,
Jose.
Jose Theodore.
Yeah.
And I pulled Varlamov had only played 4 games for us the whole year. He had come up, played 4 or 5. And we lost the first 2 games with Jose in that against the Rangers of the first series. So, I mean, I can't wait to game 4 to put in a rookie. I mean, if you're going to try something new, you got to try him in game 3. While you can still put the big goalie back in. And so I put him in, and he was outstanding for the rest of the series. We beat the Rangers in 7, and he was outstanding for the first 4 games in the Pittsburgh series. And you started to see a little bit cracks in his armor in game 5. Game 6, I think we won 6-5. And then in game 7, and this is why I'm talking about when other teams, it's so hard to stay mentally focused for a long period of time when you're not used to it, whether it's Joey Daccord or whether it's any team in general. But game 7, and I didn't want to pull him, but we had to pull him. He just couldn't stop anything. And the last thing I wanted to put was Jose back in the net, only because I mean, he's a veteran's won the MVP and everything else. It was just sort of a bad shot. And I told him, I'm sorry, but you have to go in because the other guy can't stop anything. And matter of fact, it was a Billy Guerin slap shot from outside the blue line that did it for me. And I mean, I know Theodore wasn't happy to go in at all. And he gave me that stare like I'll kill you for this. But and I actually don't blame him because it was the last. I was sort of taking a first year player over a former NHL Hart Trophy winner, so it was a tough call. But that's what you have. You have to do what you have to do when you're coaching. Like I mean, there's things that believe me, people don't understand. I don't want to do it. Coaches don't want to do things, but you have to do what's right for the team.
Right. We saw something similar to that in 2018 when the Caps actually won the cup, and the current Kraken injured number one, Philip Grubauer, was the man closing out the regular season to the point where they started him in the first 2 games of the playoffs, and he absolutely melted down, and it allowed Holtby to come back into the lineup, start, and carry him all the way to the Stanley Cup.
100% true. Yeah.
Yep, it's crazy. All right, goalies, here we go. Your favorite number one.
Now you said you know who it is.
I
I
know
will
who it
not
is.
change my
Got it.
mind.
What? You
I
want me to tell
mean,
you?
yeah.
It's got to be Johnny Bauer.
You're 100% correct.
There you
You're
go.
smarter than the average bear.
Sure.
Listen, Johnny Bauer, first of all, might have been the nicest guy I ever met.
Great guy.
And, when he was retired, he was my goalie coach for 10 years at my hockey school.
Wow.
He'd come in every year. And then when he got too old to do that, his son, Johnny Bauer Jr., took over. And, I remember meeting Johnny Bauer at Weston Arena when I was going to a hockey school when I was 12 years old. And there was not a better person. And George Armstrong was my coach in junior, and he used to room with Johnny. And he would tell us stories about how he kidded Johnny, who was the most honest guy you ever want to meet. And everything was, he was when I say simple, not simple-minded, but I mean, he was just the perfect Mr. Cleaver. Like, I mean,
Right.
he was perfect, and he would make so much fun of him all the time because he was so believable. But man, when he came on without that mask and joined the Leafs when he did from the Rochester Americans, and he played there for 12 years, and I think he won 4, 5 cups. I'm not sure. Was the greatest, nicest man I ever met. So he has to be my number one. Who's yours?
He's phenomenal. By the way, only 5 to 10% of our audience will catch the Leave It to Beaver reference right there.
Oh,
So
yeah, I'm sure that, but you know what I'm talking
I know
about,
what you're
right?
talking about. So
Okay.
yeah, Mr. Hugh Beaumont as Mr. Cleaver.
Yes, a
Um,
100%.
I interviewed Johnny at Gretzky's restaurant in Toronto 10 years ago about for television. I'm going to try to find the picture and I'll put it up over this conversation if I can. I think it's me, Joe Newendike, and Johnny Bauer at an interview at Gretzky's. Unbelievable, courteous, wonderful man, Johnny Bauer. So all the stories were true. That it was just remarkable.
One
Now,
quick story. Well, before you go,
go.
Johnny Bauer, if you ever looked at him, his hands were a mess. Like, I mean, his hands were just all meshed
Go.
together because the gloves back in those days were horrible.
Right.
And and his biggest thing about him is he hated pucks in his net. I don't know if you knew this. So in practice, if you scored on him, he would get a puck out of there as fast as he could. He didn't want any pucks in his net. So that's where George Armstrong would come in and always sneak pucks behind him while he was looking at somebody else just to tick him off.
Right.
So it was pretty good. Anyway, sorry.
All right. Now he's not my number one, but I bring him up because he's a complete opposite personality wise. But for me, in a way, maybe the greatest goaltender of all times. He was Hasek before Hasek. He was fearless. Probably helped that he was drunk, but uh, Sawchuk, Terry Sawchuk, was. You may have seen him play. It was before my time in terms of seeing him in person, but man, when I've seen video, read about him, and stories, like I know era to era things are different, but the guy was a maniac, and he was stone cold, unbelievable.
When you well, it was him and Bauer, wasn't it, there for a long time in Toronto too? But I
Yeah,
mean, he made his fame in Detroit.
right. Yeah.
And if you talk to people, to the old timers, a lot of them will say Terry Sawchuk was the best goalie ever.
Right.
And like when him and Johnny were in Toronto, they were both in their late 30s and playing incredible goal. But so I could see how that would be your number one. My son, who's almost a hockey historian, would tell you a lot of stats about Terry Sawchuk because he was a goalie, and I think Terry was his favorite. But I've heard so many stories about him being the greatest goalie of all time.
Yeah. Imagine those guys wearing today's gear. Uh,
Oh,
it'd be crazy. Uh, okay. So
imagine the courage of those goalies with
that's
no masks, bad equipment, and the
yeah.
puck still weighed the same. The puck has not changed.
Right.
It's still the same puck, even though they don't shoot it as hard. If you've ever had just a wrist shot hit you in the knee when you're out there, it kills. So
Hills.
I can't imagine it.
Hey, Bobby Hull was ripping slappers at these guys. Um,
Good point.
Honorable mention. I hate to say it because he's treated both of us to some degree like dog manure over the last 16 months. But Jimmy Rutherford, I loved him as a kid. He was my favorite player on the wings who stunk. He was number one. He had a phenomenal mask, and I liked his name, and he was very likable goaltender at the time. But Eddie Giacomin, um, all-time Rangers great, came to Detroit. I'll never forget. I was actually crying watching this as a young teenager, November 2nd of 1975. He gets traded to Detroit from New York. Wings suck. He comes back to the Garden, I think 4 nights after being traded his first game, and the crowd is chanting Eddie, 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 booing the Rangers when they score and cheering for the Red Wings at Madison Square Garden because Eddie Giacomin was in net and Detroit won the hockey game 6-4.
Well, it was a famous chant, and the Rangers not only did it that night, but I mean, when Eddie was in the net, I
Yeah,
mean, they did it all the time. And there's so many great older goaltenders that we could
go
talk
through.
about in this session. Eddie Giacomin was, I mean, I'll bet you take Lundqvist away because he's recent. You talk to Ranger people and they'll say Eddie Giacomin was the best Ranger goalie of all time too. So
Yeah,
uh right there, I mean, with Glenn Hall was another one we haven't talked about.
yeah.
And I mean, there's no sense talking about Jimmy Rutherford because he's not even in anywhere near this class. I mean, I
Uh,
think his goals against average in his history was either upper threes or
upper threes.
fours.
I think it's upper.
Yeah.
Your
So
first
I mean,
your first NHL goal
yeah,
was against
yeah.
Rutherford.
He's a small guy, so it was easy to go over top
Yeah.
of him, and he played on many teams. But
No, just the
uh,
timing with it was the timing with him because of where I lived and his mask and
yeah,
everything.
oh,
But
I get
yeah,
it. Because
not
and I used to watch him when I was growing up. He's a little older than me because he played for the Hamilton Red Wings, and they were on every Thursday night on TV in Ontario. So you got to see him play. Even though if you ask him when he got drafted, he say he was going to be he was drafted by the Montreal Junior Canadiens, but he only played for them as a pickup
yeah.
from the Memorial Cup, and he never played a game. So I mean, I find that typical of his behavior.
By the way, Eddie Jockman, first NHL person I ever interviewed. I was a high school radio station. He came into the studio, and Eddie Jockman, gracious on a Wednesday night outside of Detroit, doing an interview. First guy ever. And what bugged me about him, and no offense to him, but his eyes, and maybe this was what helped him make a, a great goaltender or whatever. But he had those. He had big eyes, like coming out of his sockets, and it was
Well, wouldn't you think you need big eyes to see everything if you were a goaltender? It's better than being the other thing and being blind, right?
Yeah, I guess so. We could have taken pick number 30s. Maybe we'll save it because we went about that long today, which is fantastic. But we went with the opposite direction with number ones in net and some dandies, I must say. Uh, we'll get you out of here, Gabby. Great stuff this week, and we'll be talking to you in the not so distant future. Simmer and Gabby, or Gabby and Simmer, Rob Simpson and Bruce Boudreau, VancouverHockeyInsider.com, SeattleHockeyInsider.com. Always a pleasure, Gab, and nothing but happiness, healthiness, and prosperity for you in 2024.
I appreciate that. And let's spread the word because this is a pretty good podcast. Good talking to you.
Good talking to
And same to you, by the way.
you.